Greetings and happy holidays, or Merry Christmas if you're a practitioner of that particular tradition, and welcome to the latest progress video for ModTown 2015, a project by the community, for the community. Now I know this isn't exactly the video most of you were expecting, particularly on a holiday such as this, and I apologize for the delay in getting the Morrowind Modding showcases and Mod of the Month videos out there. Those should be ready shortly, but still I'm excited to show off all the progress that we've been making on ModTown 2015 with you all. So I hope this video will serve to get you guys amped up for another great year of Morrowind Modding, and don't worry, we'll also be doing a few special trailers for the end of the year, and also another top 10 video for the best mods of 2015. And, well, speaking of all of that, I should also mention that ModTown 2015 has been extended until spring of 2016, so there's still plenty of time to hop on board and contribute to the project if you so desire. Now with that out of the way, let's begin with a bit of a dungeon delving, shall we? You may all remember the iconic Daedric Tower that has sort of come to symbolize ModTown 2015, and today I'm pleased to say that Melkor has created a rather unique and beautiful interior to match the really quite scenic exterior that we have here. Far from a traditional Daedric ruin, the Tower of Baelgon, as it's called, has a massive cavernous underground, with Daedric platforms suspended in the air over a bottomless abyss. It really is quite an epic looking interior, and here you'll find what I believe are called Shades of an Idea, terrible red-eyed monsters that lurk in these cavernous vaults. And this is sort of a reference to just modding in general, I believe, since a modder often has many ideas that are just sadly never worked on or ever realized. I mean, whenever you start a mod, you often start with a basic concept, and over the process of creating that mod, so many ideas just don't end up in the final product. And there's also an NPC here with a bit of dialogue, and there's plans to add some more scripting for a few extra effects in this dungeon as well in the future. Now next up, we're taking a look at the town's Alchemy Shop, as designed by Lady Phoenix Firerose, and you may remember that we covered this interior last time as well, but Lady Phoenix has continued working on it, and far from the bare bones interior we saw last time, there's a fair amount of detail and clutter in this shop now, not to mention some rather lovely lighting settings. Now obviously it still isn't 100% complete, there's a few bare shelves here and there, but so far the interior looks great and you can tell it'll be a really nice and cozy shop once it's ultimately finished. Now for our next claim, we're looking at the Oblivion Fanatics plot in Central ModTown, and this one is obviously very unique in appearance. It has a curious combination of ruined buildings, red-ruined architecture, and pine trees, not to mention a rather disturbing number of skulls just scattered about the exterior, which you would think the gods would get on to him for that. But anyway, the interior is also a bit of a strange scene, with a corpse on the floor and a note on the table, and really this claim is spread out between a number of interiors that you have to navigate through, some of which are hidden, so I'm going to try and leave off here for now without spoiling anything, but to say the least, there's a bit of a dungeon and even possibly a village hidden in this claim somewhere. Now, for quite possibly the most absurd and over-grandiose thing we'll be looking at today, our next item is, and I kid you not, a massive Dwemer airship built by Autoclock, because of course it was built by Autoclock. He's been responsible for very nearly every crazy contraption built from ModTown thus far, and this is no different. This Dwemer airship is utterly massive on a scale unheard of. It's very nearly the size of the town itself. And you'll find this Dwemer airship patrolling the skies of ModTown when the project is ultimately finished, and needless to say, you're going to need to have some pretty good distant land settings for it to even show up correctly. But anyway, as you can see here, this utter monstrosity of an airship is quite the menacing looking vessel, with lots of Dwemer tubing, engines, and much more designed in such a fashion that you'd be forgiven if you thought it was perhaps a spaceship run by Reavers out of Miranda. And quite possibly it is, and wouldn't that just be shiny? But anyway, moving on, you can tell that this swimmer airship is pretty true to the Morrowind style, and even though it's obviously all one model, it's mostly constructed from familiar Dwemer items that one can find in any Dwemer ruin across Morrowind, a nice touch that certainly adds to the style, and while currently the airship doesn't have an interior, there are plans to maybe add one in eventually, time permitting. Either way, this is certainly one of the most unique and arguably impressive contributions made to ModTown thus far, and if I may, I have to say that Autoclock has really done a stunning job of the number of things that he's contributed to the project thus far, and indeed we'll be covering a few more of his completely insane inventions at the end of this video, so if you're interested in that, do stay tuned. But needless to say, he has quite the talent for creating massive, utterly ridiculous looking things and adding them to the game, which is exactly what ModTown is for, really, I have to say. And just to show you guys how this looks from the ground, you can see this monster of an airship from street level here, where it quite literally blocks out the sun. Once ModTown is finished, you can look forward to finding yourself suddenly covered in shadow as you stroll through our fair city as ModTown's Guardian patrols the skies above. And really, I imagine it would be quite frightening for tourists. Which may well be the point, but moving on, we're next looking at the ModTown Town Hall as designed by Lady Phoenix Firerose, and you can see here that it's an interesting mix of Imperial and Daedric architecture, of those sorts of tavern pieces that you'll find in the construction set mixed in with the Imperial fort pieces, and what appears to be Daedric walls. And going on to the interior side of things, inside we have this large banquet hall where many of the town's meetings will be held, and this is done in Lady Phoenix's typical ice and fire-like design with strong Daedric influences that's certainly very eye-catching, and really the entire building is just very unique in appearance, and I can imagine that there will be some very interesting festivities here. Now, going on to one of the other modder claims, we're going to take a look at the Sassman's plot, and this is actually a separate island connected to ModTown proper by way of an extensive dark bridge. And this island is a bit different from the rest of ModTown in that it's a sort of winter wonderland, crowned at the top by a curious hut. But there's much more to this island than merely a snow-covered rock with lots of trees and other foliage. Here you'll find a portal to another island, an island within an island, if you will, Inception and all that, and here you'll find the real meat of the Sassman's claim, starting with an interesting garden-like area with flowering trees and Daedric architecture, and, you know, really this area just kind of reminds me a bit of one of the locations in Rise of House Telvanni. And anyway, you'll also find that conveniently this realm of the Sassman has transportation to every city on Vardenfell by way of gates that open up portals when you get near them. Sort of like that famous TV show, Gatestar, I believe it's called, where they have that one guy with the tattoo on his forehead and the other guy with the glasses, and I'm not being very descriptive here. But anyway, besides a large number of these portals scattered all across the Sassman's realm, there's also a central Telvanni-style house with some outside decorations, including a Christmas wreath, which is rather suitable given the date and all that. And there's also lots of fun-coloured crystals that just add a bit of colour to the landscape. And you'll also find an outdoor dining area nearby with a lot of unique stuff going on, such as Daedric labeled brandy and booze, which really just makes sense in Morrowind if you think about it. Everything really ought to be in Daedric since it is the sort of official script of Morrowind. But anyway, just moving on, there's a small Telvanni interior for the house pod, and quite appropriately, given the date, there's a Christmas tree, and just a fun fact, the Sassman originally made all this for Modmas, a Christmas-themed community modding project hosted by Great House Fligerty a few years ago, and as I keep saying, ModTown 2015 is the perfect project for recycling old mod files. And next up we have, well, my claim actually. I must apologize real quick for the bad frame rate. I sort of went overboard when designing my plot, and the FPS took a major hit as a result. though really it's not that bad all things considering. Anyway, my claim consists of a forest with some Nordic and Imperial style houses and docks just sort of scattered throughout. I really wasn't planning to make an entire woodland area, it just sort of happened while I was working, and things spiraled out of control from there. It's just sort of how it all came together so far, if you will. You'll notice that instead of using the landscaping tool to paint on road textures, I've instead opted to create paths using planks and cobblestone walls. And no, you don't want to know how long that took. That took a really long time. And anyway, the main compound here is where my model avatar is going to live, in the big house that's connected via Sky Bridge, and I'm planning to fill up these other buildings with the characters from my various mods, like good old Thexan from A Hermit's Request, Rinda and Christophe from Of Justice and Innocence, and probably Hatium as well hiding out on the property somewhere. I always put a lot of myself into my characters, so it makes sense that they would have homes on my plot as well. But anyway, you'll notice I spent a lot of time creating a number of gardens all over the property and throughout the woods to just sort of add a lot of colour to the landscape, and I think it works pretty well. And heading outside of the main compound here, I set up a small outdoor dining area with a view of the sea and also the surrounding forest, though the FPS hit is pretty bad here, and I think that has something to do with the candles I'm using here, honestly. But it's a nice cozy place to sort of relax and enjoy a meal. And as you continue down the path this way, actually, you'll be heading towards Charlie Mr. Wolf's territory, though I don't actually have his plot loaded at the moment. And sort of just on the very edge of the woodland area I've created here is another peaceful dock looking out to sea. And I just sort of like these things, you know. These are opportunities to just look out into the ocean and just sort of take in the sun setting or something of that nature. Now real quick, I wanted to show you guys what this area looks like at night time, just because the lighting conditions are really a large part of what makes this place feel atmospheric, at least I think so. And you'll notice I tried to use a combination of different colours here for the lights, like we have red lights and blue lights, just sort of mixed in with the typical street lights you can expect to find. And I just have to say that I don't know about you guys, but there's just something about travelling along a well-lit path through the woods at night time that just feels magical to me, very quaint and peaceful. And of course you can also see that the dining area in the dark again, and it's still very laggy. I'm going to have to do something about that eventually, and I swear it's those candles, it's just something about them really causes FPS to go haywire. But anyway, moving on, next up we're looking at a series of cavernous dungeons by Hybrid Disorder, and these are going to be located somewhere beneath ModTown when the project is ultimately finished. Now to say the least, these caverns are fairly massive, and making your way down is almost certainly going to require levitation of one kind or another, but it's a fairly atmospheric cavern nonetheless, filled with plant life from trees to mushrooms, hugging the rock faces, and roots coming off the sides, and really I have to say that it all looks rather lovely, at least from a passive perspective, with an absolutely lovely set of waterfalls down here at the bottom, and there's actually a lake down here at the bottom as well, which is a nice thing to land if you accidentally fall or your levitation potion runs out. And there's also the occasional ruins sticking out of everything. And really, these caverns are obviously already inhabited, and there's a wide range of creatures that'll try to murder you as you make your way around in here, and they range from Duma Centurions to, I think there's a few Daedra in here as well, and your typical everyday rat and mud crab and things of that nature. And sort of moving on, there's also a secondary cavern filled with Duma ruins, as you can see here, with lots of lava and fire and brimstone, adding a bit of contrast to the relatively less volcanic cavern we saw just before. And in any event, Hybrid Disorder has created some really well done and detailed cavern dungeons that you guys will get to explore once the project is ultimately finished, hopefully by April or May or sometime around that just general vicinity. And moving on, the next thing we're going to be looking at is the Community Consortium headquarters as designed by Terralic. Now, the Community Consortium has gone through a few different iterations over the past several months. Originally, it was being built by Autoclock, and had a Telvanni architectural style. Then that was scrapped and replaced with a Velothian megastructure, and then Autoclock gave the claim up to Terralic, who's taken it in a very interesting direction indeed. With Terralic's vision, the Community Consortium has become a mismatch of architectural styles, including Hlaalu, Dwemer, and Imperial, and it certainly presents a rather unique setting for ModTown's main quest. Now, for those who don't know, the Community Consortium is the central faction in ModTown, charged with servicing the needs of modders and planning town expansions and generally keeping everything running smoothly. As part of the main quest, the player will work their way up from the bottom tier to potentially become the new Grand Architect of ModTown and the Overseer of the Community Consortium. According to our rather loose quest outline, this will take place over a series of about between 16 and 18 quests, I believe it is, and we have a loose summary of what those quests are going to be about, but we're still a ways off from implementing quests, so focusing more on the architectural side of things, you can see that you'll most likely need some sort of levitation to get around parts of the Community Consortium campus, or with flying buildings, towers sitting atop mushrooms, and many other strange and curious sights. I do think Terralic has done a pretty good job of representing just the sort of creative madness that typically consumes modders, with an eccentric combination of elements that really just sort of fits that mad description. And let's face it, most of us are pretty crazy, whether we realize it or not, or accept it, and modding is a pretty crazy hobby if we really just get down to the bare bones of it. But moving on to our final claim of this video, we're taking a look at Autoclock's Auto Tower and Telvanni Airship. Now, some of you may remember that we already covered the Auto Tower in a previous progress video, but Autoclock has once again changed the design somewhat, so I thought I'd show off the new version here. And of course, circling the tower is a Telvanni airship that Autoclock has designed, and some of you may have already seen it in a video Autoclock posted a while back. But it's a really cool feature, and reportedly the Telvanni airship will have an interior at some point, with the possibility of the player controlling it. Now, won't that just be a good bit of fun? And just real quick, I'd like to show you guys how the Auto Tower looks from the ground, just so you get an appropriate sense of its imposing scale, and the rather cool aspect of the Telvanni airship just sort of floating above it and around it. And even from the ground, the tower is really quite scenic, though also a bit intimidating, as pretty much everything that Autoclock builds tends to be just a tad bit menacing. And anyway, the Autoclock tower also has an interior that roughly matches the exterior, filled with Dwemer piping and general Dwemer designs. It should be noted that given Autoclock's tendency to redo things, this shouldn't be taken as being the finalized interior or even the exterior. Things will probably change, they always do with Autoclock, but even so, what we can see so far is pretty impressive. The interior is incredibly unique, and you can just sort of imagine what functions all this Dwemer equipment might have in the hands of a mad modder. Or Spark, as Autoclock does remind me of the Sparks in the webcomic Gold Genius. Not that there's anything wrong with that. All of us modders are really quite mad, and Autoclock would be the first to tell you that. But anyway, wrapping up with the Auto Tower, that's pretty much all the major progress we have to show you guys for this month. We'll be back next month with another progress video showcasing our work, so do stay tuned for that. And we're also going to have an official trailer for ModTown 2015 at some point. And don't forget, you can still join in on the fun. We're keeping ModTown 2015 going until the spring of 2016, so there's still plenty of time. Anyway, happy holidays. Do stay safe over this holiday season. And thanks for watching, and a special thanks to all the modders who contributed to ModTown 2015 so far. I'll see you guys all next time.